Welcome back, everybody, to the best guild in all of Ravnica. Tonight we're going to finish off the entire Zendikar Rising storyline. You can probably already tell that I don't have the usual little time thingies up because there's not really a lot to go over in terms of synopsis or like future predictions. So we're all just going to be doing a one long kind of discussion thing because you'll soon realize not a lot actually happens. It's a lot more character driven and it's not really a synopsis, but we'll get to it later. What I also want to talk about is the fact that, like, I'm going to be honest with all of you, I am very tired. I severely underestimated what doing 2 videos a week every week for a month straight does to me, specifically with a 40-hour work week on top of it, and the fact that I've never done this before. It has legitimately cannibalized all of the other ideas that I had planning. Like, I had a little Warhammer video planning, which is still coming. I had another thing planned out that kind of got pushed to the side for this. Now, I don't regret it. I enjoyed this, and I actually enjoyed the whole storyline as a whole, aside from Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, but as a whole, I loved this. But my god, it really does, it takes its toll, I'm going to be honest with you. So, as for how we're going to handle next story, I'm really not that interested in Vikings or Viking lore all that much, so I don't know if I'll do this for the following rotation of storylines. If the demand is there and if you guys really want me to cover it, I'll cover it. It probably won't be as in-depth as this, simply because I don't think it'll appeal to me as much as like an adventuring party would. But if like the vast majority of you all want me to do that, I'll do it. I love communicating with you all, and I love the concept of like explaining literature to every one of you, so I'll do it if you guys want it, but it's a lot. So, I'm just going to say it right now, before I get into the actual storyline. This video is going to go up, I believe, a Friday morning, possibly Saturday, depending on how late I get from work tomorrow. There will be one more video going up on October 10th, and then after that, I'm going to go take a break, because your boy is tired. So I'm going to take a break. I'm going to just go finish painting my Tau army that I have been half painted for like a month now. So I'm going to take a break, and then I'm going to come back and start working on the Zendikar architectural video, which I already have some ideas planned, but I really just need like a week or two to just stop thinking about making videos. So after October 10th, it's going to be a little break, and I'm going to see how long it takes me to get the next video up and running, because my usual videos take a lot because I love editing them like crazy, so you all know the process if you've seen my previous videos. But anyway, as for the actual storyline, we start off immediately where we left off. This is officially like the final climax of the storyline, and the entire chapter is just it. It's just one giant action set piece, which is fine. It's what you would expect the climax to be. But effectively, Nahiri and Jace try to fight Nissa and her elementals, and they just can't. Like, Nissa overwhelms them, and this is a constant thing throughout the entire story. I mean, this chapter. Nissa is in control of the situation almost at all times. I don't think there was ever a point where she's on the back pedal, but I get it. They just wanted this to be like her one sign of power, because Nissa, as far as I'm aware, has been repeatedly losing and being shit at everything she's done over the past couple storylines. So I think it was okay to toss her a win or so, and it makes sense for her to be extremely overpowered on Zendikar when she's like so connected to the ley lines. But Nahiri and Jace start running away from her because they realize that they're not going to beat her. They head back into the Singing City, and it's kind of implied that Jace put up his little ear spell again, which, again, I don't understand why he was preparing that, but whatever. They go in there, and they're basically just him and Nahiri are talking. Wait, that's a good point. Why were they talking? They couldn't hear each other. Okay. Gonna gloss over that. They start communicating with each other and decide about what they're going to do, whether they should take the orb to Ravnica, and Jace is still trying to continuously convince Nahiri to let him take the orb back to Ravnica. Nahiri informs him that it won't work on Ravnica, it won't work out of Zendikar. How Nahiri knows this, I have no idea. Why Jace trusts this, I have no idea. But ultimately, Nahiri doesn't agree with him, and they start fighting. And Nahiri pins Jace down with a bunch of Hedrons. And then Soren comes out of nowhere and just starts laughing at Nahiri from across the room. Nahiri gets angry and attacks Soren. But wait, it wasn't Soren, it was just an illusion by Jace. And I'm going to be honest with you, it got me. It got me for like a good 10 seconds. I genuinely believe Soren kind of just popped in there because he got sick of Nahiri's shit. So, kudos to the author for getting me for a good 10 seconds before I continue reading the next line. So, Nahiri loses her footing. Jace comes in and completely overwhelms her mind and takes control of her, which is kind of messed up. It's been a moral and ethical dilemma throughout this whole storyline as to whether Jace should be doing this or not, but I understand it. It's very difficult to write a character with Jace's power set as a good person, because underneath all of that power will always be the moral question as to, like, how much is Jace actually controlling an individual and completely erasing their sentience and their autonomy. But we'll touch upon that a little later. He does that, he makes Nahiri give him the stone, and then he runs away from Nahiri. And he kind of just hopes that he gets to the exit before Nahiri can dispel herself from the mind control and run after him. And he does, he makes it out just in time. And he is once again greeted with Nissa and the elementals. As to why Jace doesn't just planeswalk away to Ravnica, he understands and at least has some sense of self-reflection, whereas if he leaves with the Lithiform core now, Nissa would never forgive him, because he'd basically just be doing the most selfish thing possible and ignoring Zendikar entirely, and just be going back to Ravnica for his own, not nefarious needs, but just his own little selfish needs of the Nicol Bolas problem that he is the only one that knows about. But he meets Nissa again, and they try to communicate with each other as to what the best course of action is. Jace tells Nissa that they can go take it to Ravnica to study it. Nissa's like, what happens if you just blow up Ravnica again? Jace says, well, Nahiri told me it won't work. Nissa says the obvious question as to, like, how the hell do you believe Nahiri when she says this? Jace kind of just shrugs. They start arguing again. Nissa gets Ashaya to pin Jace down, and Jace starts speaking to her telepathically. While this is happening, Jace is trying to communicate with Nissa telepathically, and the Lithiform core starts speaking to Nissa. And it is revealed that the voice coming out of the Lithiform core is the spiritual entity of Zendikar, the entire planet's spiritual manifestation. It's a voice that Nissa can communicate with. This is implied to be the same voice that has been whispering to Nahiri the entire previous 2 chapters that Nahiri didn't want to listen to. Now, looking back, it makes a little more sense that Nahiri wouldn't want to listen to that little voice, because it wouldn't be the voice of the stones that she's so used to hearing. She probably subconsciously knew that it was some supernatural, spiritual force of nature speaking, so that's probably why she didn't want to listen to it. It makes a little more sense in hindsight now. Now, does that excuse the confusion in the previous chapters of Nahiri not wanting to listen to stones? I think so. I have a very strong opinion as, like, these stories were probably meant to be read as a whole, and the plot lines were meant to be told as a whole. Like, Jace's plot lines of mind control and the ethics behind that are a reoccurring theme that slowly builds up from the previous chapters. And it reminds me a lot of the unbelievable Gwenpool's comic book series that came out about 1.5 years ago. It was a 5-part miniseries where the first 3 parts kind of like messed up with the characterization of the main character, but then it's revealed in the 4th and 5th issues that was the whole point, and it was supposed to be a stance, and the story was supposed to revolve around the various different characterizations of a fictional character across multiple authors. So it makes sense when you read it as a whole instead of reading it as like a weekly or bi-weekly story piece, which I believe is what happens here with these recurring themes and kind of like fading character motivations that we go through. So I'm going to put my opinion as to, like, that's fine. It makes sense in hindsight, and it makes sense when I see the story as a whole, which makes sense to me since it's meant to be 5 parts of a singular story. These aren't 5 individual plot lines connected. There's just one underlying plot line going through all of them. So it's fine. I get it. So moving on from that, Jace still tries to argue with Nissa as to how to handle this. The core is speaking to Nissa, telling her that she needs to trust her own power and try to heal Zendikar the way that she believes it should be healed, or at least the way that her power is manifesting its way to heal. And Nissa is thinking as to what would Gideon do, but then she realizes that no, what would I do? What should I do? And as she's kind of like pondering this internally, Jace tries to control her mind. And when I read that, it was big yikes. Really, really big yikes when it comes to that, because Jace mind controlling Nahiri is already morally questionable as is. Jace mind controlling Nahiri as the proposed villain of the storyline is risky, but we accepted it because I guess he's a good guy and he's doing this for the betterment of Zendikar, which he really isn't. Looking back at it, we probably shouldn't be as okay as him mind controlling Nahiri as we are, because she's the quote-unquote villain, which I'll touch upon that later, because I don't think she's an actual villain in this storyline. But Jace tries to mind control Nissa. Nissa immediately realizes what he's doing and cuts off their mental link. And she is furious. She's absolutely livid, but not in like the angry yelling way, more of the very quiet and extremely disappointed that he just broke their friendship kind of way. So Nissa cuts it off, super angry at him, and orders Ashaya. Well, she doesn't order. She kind of like tells Ashaya to pin him down and make it so that he can't like do his magic anymore. And she does, and he just grunts away, and he's taken out of the equation as is. Nahiri comes back, and they're just yelling. And Nahiri takes out 50 swords out of the air and tries to throw them in, which, by the way, it's something that I noticed. The numbers in this story are weird. Like, Nahiri taking a 12 swords makes sense, like you can visualize 12 swords around her, but then why up the number to 50? It just visually doesn't work right. Like, if you try to picture 50 swords flying in the air, like, where does Nahiri pull these out from? Do these just manifest in the air out of nowhere? Why has she never always done 50 swords at a time? So it's weird. I feel like that should have been an editorial decision, or like somebody should have looked at that and been like, you should probably tone that down a little to a more realistic number, or a more sensible number, like a dozen or 15, something that's a little more easy to grasp to the average reader when they're like picking up on these visual cues. But anyway, Nissa looks at the core and feels her way out, and she fears that she's going to do the same thing that Nahiri did. But she does it anyway. She lets off the life from core and connects it to the very ley lines of Zendikar. And what it does is it turns the entire area around her into dust. It completely destroys the Singing City, at least that's how I read it and understood it. It's all ash, and she feels really bad, and she wonders what she just did and starts feeling very guilty. But then out of nowhere, all of the elementals that appear to have died come back to life more vibrant and more beautiful than ever. And she's like, oh, this healed it. The lithiform core is like completely empty. All of its energy was used up. She plops it down, and she leaves and runs away because she does not want to deal with Nissa and Jace right now. I mean, she doesn't want to deal with Nahiri and Jace right now, which is understandable because Jace, her close friend and almost family member, tried to completely control her mind because she disagreed with him on how to handle something about her home, which is really messed up of Jace to do. Like, I can't get over how messed up that is for Jace to do that. Like, he didn't even have the need to do it that he did with Nahiri, because Nissa was probably going to do what was best for Zendikar as a whole, and Jace should have at least understood that, or trusted her decision-making as a friend, aside from actively realizing that Nahiri wasn't going to do this the good way, because he said that he believes that Nahiri's version of good, when he peered into her mind, isn't the same as theirs. So he's already disagreeing with Nahiri on that, so there's no reason for Jace to do this, but he does, and it's annoying. I get how it's built up. It's not like as-pulled. It's built up as the story progresses, but it's still a really messed up decision that he did. And he's going to have to deal with the consequences of this decision as we come by. But anyway, Nissa leaves, and Nahiri's really, really angry at Jace. Jace is like, we should apologize to Nissa. She did the right thing, and we should have known that. Nahiri says, no, an apology's not going to fix this. You just pissed her off and me. Bye, and she plain walks away. I don't know where she goes, but she just leaves. And Jace is stuck there in the middle of ashes, seeing everything grow around him, and he picks up the core and just contemplates how he's going to make this up to Nissa. And that's the entire storyline. It's an interesting way to end it, where we ended with Jace in solitude instead of like a rebirth of Zendikar, like Nissa. But aside from that, now we're going to touch upon what I felt, not only in this part, but as a story as a whole, and my kind of concluding thoughts. So I don't know how long this is going to take, so hopefully it's a nice video, so we're just going to take it a little slower. So first I want to touch upon the lithiform core as the MacGuffin of this entire storyline, and I didn't like it. I have a lot of issues with how it was handled throughout the storyline and what occurred with it as the story progressed. First of all, this was made by the core, and this was confirmed by the spirit of Zendikar, that this was made by the core. The core made this artifact to repair and renew something, and that's all we know about it so far. And that doesn't make sense to me, because if the core made this with the effect to renew and revitalize something, how is it connected to the spirit of Zendikar's plane so deeply that it can speak through it? And the core, as far as I'm aware, were around long before long before the Eldrazi were trapped on Zendikar. Unless I get that wrong, I don't really understand what the core were trying to revitalize. If anything at all, I don't know what made them do it. And I don't know if we're going to touch upon that later on, but in regards to this story as a whole unity and its whole individual piece, I don't like the origins of the MacGuffin, because it doesn't really make sense to me. Now, what the exact powers of the core are is also very vague. When Nahiri uses it, it turns everything to ash and just kills everything and fixes the Hedrons. When Nissa used it, it also turned things to ash, but then it also healed the plane, which, thinking about it, is what Jace originally hypothesized back on Zendikar when he said that he thought, when he was reading through the scrolls, that it was probably influenced by the user in some way, which makes sense. Nahiri wanted to destroy and kill everything, or at least get everything but the actual original city back, and Nissa wanted to revitalize the plane, trusting her own instinct. So you could tell that the lithoform core had some sort of sentience and kind of just pulled in the way that the user wanted it to. But then, that also doesn't make sense, because if the core is an extension of Zendikar's power, why would it give control of what it does to the user? I feel like it would make more sense for it to just do what Zendikar would want it to do, which I guess it does when it helps Nissa do what she wants to do, but it's very confusing, and I feel like I understand bits and pieces of it with Jace's original hypothesis and the way it's influenced, but when you really think about it a little deeper, it doesn't make sense for the core thousands and thousands of years ago to make a device like this before the Eldrazi come in. Or at least to program it in such a way where it's so easily swayed as its effects. Because revitalizing the planet and murdering everything are very different things. It also seems like this core can just do anything as long as the user uses it in some way. So, and that doesn't really make a good MacGuffin, it just makes it a do everything button. Which reminds me of the Zeno button from Dragon Ball Super. It just fixes whatever problem you have in the way. But anyway, moving on from something that I didn't like, to something that I really enjoyed about this, is the way that A.J. Greenblatt writes character interactions. Not in the party sense, because as I've spoken ad nauseum before, I hate the way she writes the party as a whole. I don't like it. The whole adventuring party aspect was horrible. I hated it. It is my least favorite chapter of the whole thing. But the other chapters, I thoroughly enjoyed the way she made characters interact with each other and made the differing motivations and different ideologies converse, like an actual conversation. These weren't just mindless followers of a perspective fighting each other for their own wants and desires. These were three people that wanted the same goal. Well, no, two people that wanted the same goal, and Jace who just wanted research. But Nahiri and Nissa ideologically wanted the same end, which was restoring Zendikar or healing Zendikar. Their idea of healing Zendikar was different. As Nissa stated, Nissa wanted to preserve and flourish the new, the nature that's grown out, and Nahiri wanted to revitalize the old core-controlled planet. So, these nuances in they want what's best for Zendikar, but the different lies on what they believe the best for Zendikar is to be, were really interesting dynamics to see and feel when it comes to their conversations with each other. And I think that's where this story excels at the most, and it's the characters, and that's what I want to spend the bulk of this analysis in, is the individual characters that we interact with and how they interact with each other. Like I said before, the party dynamics, horrible. Kaza and Aura, literally useless. Aura, I think, is the most useless character I have seen in a piece of fiction in recent memory. Which is kind of hilarious, because him being completely useless has made me actually like the character in some way. Like, I at least remember Aura. Kaza, yeah, she saves Aura, but that's about everything she does. Aura does nothing, and it's comedically sad how he does nothing at all. He just oogles and ahs at everything that happens and nothing. So, now, them two out of the way, because honestly, I can't get over the fact that they did absolutely nothing. Not even narratively did they do anything, but moving on from them, the characters that I'm speaking about the most is Akiri, Zareth, Jace, Nissa, and Nahiri. So let's take the couple in first, between Zareth and Akiri. They're very good characters. I enjoyed them a lot. The differences in characterization between the way that A.J. Greenblatt wrote them and the way that Miguel Lopez wrote them is there, and I prefer the way that Miguel Lopez wrote them, but that doesn't mean the way A.J. Greenblatt wrote them is bad. She did not write them badly. They're very well written, and them as characters and the personality traits that they have and how they possess and represent those personality traits were written very well. Them being lovers thing, that's fine. I got over it. I got used to it very quickly. After a while, I just realized, okay, if I was reading this as like a singular piece by her, it'd be fine. I wouldn't have any other quarrels with the characterization of that. So, moving on from that. Zareth's fear of death and fear of the past, and Akiri's longing and desire for hope, ultimately what tied them together. And Zareth, he didn't really get a lot done personality-wise in the storyline. I may be just blurring the lines between the way he was characterized here and the way he was characterized in the side story. So I'm going to drop that there. Zareth, so far, really good character. One of my favorites of this scene, but I think a lot of that is from the side story, so I'm going to push that aside for a bit. Now, Akiri, the way that Akiri functions in this piece, like I said, she doesn't come back, and I'm so happy that she didn't come back at all. She's gone. She understands the fear that she has towards planeswalkers, the resentment she has towards planeswalkers, and it's such a nice thing to do, and a nice concept to touch upon as an author, that these are superpowered beings fighting gigantic battles. These things have results. These things affect the people outside of these battles. And we saw the effects of the people in the scarred Zendikar that we saw. We saw people left handicapped because of the war. We saw the buildings slowly rebuilt. We saw everything kind of like after the fact. And Akiri, to me, is the perfect example of somebody that wants answers to the questions in her life, but all the answers are bad. Like, it's really a weird perspective to look at. It's a very interesting perspective to look at where nothing you do has any real say in the things that happen to you and your loved ones. Like, if we really think about it, Akiri had no sense of, like, control in anything that happened to her. Everything in her life has been a result of some otherworldly being completely destroying her life. The Eldrazi were trapped there by planeswalkers. She didn't understand the concept of planeswalker, but she knew that something outside of Zendikar trapped the Eldrazi there. The Eldrazi wreaked havoc, killed her first adventuring party, killed everybody that she really cared about. She found Zareth in these rubbles and formed a bond with him, only to have Nahiri come back and kill, like, not even, like, she killed him. She just straight up aimed that thing at him and killed him with absolutely no remorse, and Akiri couldn't do anything about it. Her meeting Jason Nissa, the people that were, as we're told, the heroes of the storyline, didn't help, because these are still two superpowered beings that cannot relate to Akiri's situation or Akiri's perspective at all. They're really terrifying when you really think about it, and H.E. Greenblatt wonderfully wrote them and wrote that fear and that, like, terror well. Like, when she said that Nissa had the entire planet bending around her, when Jace just casually mind controls or reads the minds of somebody that is implied to be miles away with very little effort, if any at all. Seeing Nakiri just climb up these gigantic floating staircases that she created, sees her manifesting swords. Like, put yourself in Akiri's shoes. That shit is terrifying. And that, I think, is wonderful, and it's one of my favorite things of this entire story, is how this fear of planeswalkers is correctly characterized. And I think that was the purpose that Akiri is meant to place here. How do the regular people interact with these gigantic planeswalkers? Like, if you compare it to Ravnica, for example, where Jace comes from, superpowered beings that have control over your life isn't a rarity. That just happened. That's an accepted thing that occurs in your life. When you look at Amonkhet, these gods that walk among you, are ultimately in control of the situation and control everything, but they at the very least can go participate in the challenge of the gods and have some self of autonomy towards their life. People of Zendikar don't. And when you really think about it, if you look at the people of Innistrad, they don't either. If you look at the people of Dominaria, they don't either. It's usually just Karn, the Weatherlight crew, and whatever villain just decides to pop on. The everyday people, not only in Magic, but the everyday people of most fictional universes have to struggle with the consequences of what the main characters do. And I congratulate A.T. Greenblatt for the way she wrote that into Akiri. Absolutely my favorite part of this entire storyline has been that perspective shift. And I'm going to ask all of you just, how would you react if you met a planeswalker as a regular human being? If you were just walking down the street or something happened or like some big event happened and you met a planeswalker, would you genuinely not be afraid of them? Like, how would you feel? How would you interact with them? Would you even try to interact with them at all? I'm like genuinely curious, because when I ask myself that question, I don't know. I don't know what I would feel if I met a planeswalker in real life, because it's terrifying to just see somebody that has all of the power and all of the control, literally more powerful than anything else on your entire planet. It breaks your world, and I understand why Akiri just said, nope, this is not for me. This is way above my pay grade, and leaves. And that is a very strong stance to have, because the woman still hates planeswalkers. She still hates them, and I am excited to see what comes of that, because she's going to go back, and she's not going to be quiet about this. She's going to tell people about this, even after the restoration of Zendikar occurs. And when we come back to Zendikar, because of course we're going to come back to Zendikar at some point, I think that's going to be the main guiding focus of this, and I'm very excited to see where that's going to go. Moving on from them into the three face characters of Jace, Nahiri, and Nissa, I want to touch upon Jace now. And the way that Jace handles his mind control, I understand what Wizards of the Coast is trying to do. Writing your main character, the face of your company, to be a person that genuinely just has no problem controlling people's minds, peering into the memories, like, that is a very nefarious power set to give a character. It's very delicate to give a power of mind control and not have them abuse it. If you look at comic books and you see characters that can control minds or read people's minds in the comic books, it is explicitly stated that they either can't control it, or you kind of just have to take their word for it that they're not using it at all times. Like, take Jean Grey, for example. Multiple times, she's a villain, because it's really easy to turn a mind-controlling person into a villain. Look at Emma Frost. She's also villainous when you really think about it. When you look at Professor X, he's supposed to be the best mind reader you can be, like one of the most powerful ones, and somebody that wants to objectively do the right thing and the good thing, but he doesn't. He always, continuously will cross that line of reading people's minds. Like, sure, it's made a point to say that he doesn't do this with new students, but as far as I've read the few X-Men comic books that I have and talked about X-Men to people, Professor Xavier will oftentimes just peer into somebody's mind when he really needs to. And that's the line that I think Wizards of the Coast wants to define. The when he needs to read people's minds. Because that line was crossed twice in the storyline. Against Nahiri and against Nyssa. And the question of did he have to do this was asked internally. Did he have to do that against Nahiri? I don't think so. I don't think he had to. I think there could have been another way of doing that wasn't just straight up controlling Nahiri entirely. Because now you have to ask yourself the question as to why didn't he do this 3 chapters ago? And that is not a question you want to ask, you want your readers asking. But I also get why Wizards of the Coast doesn't just want Jace to solve every problem with mind control, because it's very easy for him to do this. It's very effortless. The only reason Jace didn't have full and utter control over Nahiri was because he was actively trying to upkeep the spell, stopping his mind from being broken by the Singing City. The Singing City nerfed Jace in the storyline, and it needed to. If we had a fully powered, unnerfed Jace here, he would have completely stomped Nahiri and taken the orb a while ago before he actually pissed off Nyssa. But I understand, I get what Wizards of the Coast's weird position is here, because if you write your main character to have no regard for people's autonomy and consent, it's a really bad look. It's why when you have Wolverine fighting, you do have him fighting robots and you have him fighting wild monsters or creatures, because having Wolverine actively slash and destroy people, it's not a good look for your brand. In this case, having Jace, the only way you can really have Jace go all out with his powers is by either nerfing him, as we saw with the Singing City, or putting him in a situation where his mind control doesn't work, like against the fungus monster and against Yasha. But once we have the fundamental agreement that in order for Jace to be the main character, he either has to be nerfed, or his powers have to not be able to affect the people that he's fighting, then the only conflict you can really have that is fundamentally good with Jace is the moral questioning and the moral ambiguity that he has within himself, which is the internal struggle that we see throughout this entire storyline. He does control people's minds, he does peer into people's minds further than he really should, but it's that internal monologue, that struggle he faces with himself as to how far is he willing to push the envelope, like with the Innkeeper at the beginning, here with Nahiri, and then again with Nyssa. And in the ending scene, I think it ends with Jace alone, because that is, I think they wanted Jace to suffer for his consequences. Suffer for his actions with the consequences that he brings upon himself. Because what he did to Nyssa, I thought about it, and I even asked my friends how they would react if one of their closest friends did it to them, and what I got was an overwhelming range of either I'm not speaking to this person for literal years, or I'm just never forgiving that person for doing that. Specifically, the way that Jace did it, the last thing Jace did before trying to peer into Nyssa's mind was tell her that he was going to help her. That is manipulative to no, and that isn't even a sign of a stressed or a Jace that's pushed against the wall. That is a conniving, that is a planning, that is a plotting Jace that we saw there. And it is fascinating to see that, because it's a bit of Jace that I don't think we've seen in a while. I haven't seen Jace like this, and he suffered for it, and he's going to suffer the consequences of doing that in regards to his relationship with Nyssa, and he's going to need Nyssa at some point, and Nyssa's not going to want to be a part of it. She's not going to be one part of anything that isn't Zendikar related, at least for a long while, I think. I don't think we're going to see Nyssa for a while. Now, the last point I want to touch upon, because my god, we are at 29 minutes. I have to wrap this up soon. Okay. The last thing that I want to touch upon is how how Nyssa and Nahiri were characterized, how their motivations were placed, and how those motivations are put as hero and villain. Because I disagree strongly with Nyssa being a hero of the storyline. I don't like what Nyssa did. I don't agree with anything Nyssa... Well, I don't agree with most of what Nyssa did. Because Nyssa, for starters, had no idea what using the other form core was going to do. She injected that thing into the planet's ley lines with no regard regarding it, but she had no idea what was going to happen. The good thing happened, but that's because the author wanted the good thing to happen, not because Nyssa thought the good thing was going to happen. And I don't like that. I don't like the way that Nyssa just shut out any kind of answer to helping Zendikar. Let's be honest. Nyssa, we know that Jace taking the orb back to Ravnica was a bad idea, because he was just going to use it to fight Nicol Bolas, or use it for the Gatewatch. But Nyssa didn't know that. Nyssa trusts Jace. So for Nyssa's perspective, I feel like it makes sense for her to at least trust Jace enough to take it back to Ravnica and study it, or at least have Jace study it on Zendikar at least for a little while. But I understand why she didn't. I get her motivation, but I think her motivation is selfish. I'm gonna say it straight out. I think Nissa's motivations are inherently selfish. Because as much as she wants the elementals to thrive and the elemental are her people, what about everybody else? Like, Nahiri does a pretty good point of like, okay, you want things to flourish and you want things to grow and it's good, but the Royal is still like actively killing people. It's actively destroying the civilization that's trying to live on this planet. And like, it's put as a bad and as a negative that Nahiri disregards the life of the elementals in order to preserve the core lifestyle. But Nahiri isn't just preserving the core lifestyle. It also includes all of the other people that are living and currently actively being destroyed and haunted by the Royal on a continuous basis. Like, the Eldrazi are gone. The only thing destroying their homes is the Royal. So I don't understand why Nahiri's painted as this all-out villain. Like, I get her actions are villainous, but her motivations really aren't, and they're not any more villainous or heroic than Nissa's motivations. Nissa's motivations are inherently selfish, like I said before. She wants to protect the elementals and protect nature because it's what she thinks is best, but it's what's best for her. It's her family. She's not looking at the families of the merfolk that are probably getting ripped apart by the Royal. They're not looking at the families of everybody else that's trying to survive right now. She's just looking at the jungle, and she's looking at this thriving Zendikar. And I think that's why they didn't touch upon what Zendikar looks like. Like, we didn't actually get told that the Royal stopped. That area that Nissa affected, that started to grow and flourish, but we don't actually see that. We see the part of Nissa going to other places and seeing them start to flourish, so it's implied that the planet is flourishing with nature. But let's be honest here, that doesn't solve the problem. The nature of Zendikar wasn't ever really in trouble. It was fine as far as that was aware. It was the Royal that was completely wrecking stuff. And I don't think this is going to end well. I don't think it makes sense for it not to, but we aren't told that the Royal stopped. We aren't. We're just told that Zendikar was revitalized and reviving and kind of like healing itself, but it should have already done that. Like, the point of this was to stop the Royal, but I don't think a freshly revitalized natureful Zendikar is good, because it's going to kill a lot of people if the planet goes a little more savage. A wild Zendikar is not a good place to live in, if you're at least a member of a civilization that lives on technology or a more traditional modern lifestyle. If you're like Nissa or like the elves that you thrive in nature, it makes sense for you, but the other races, like, it's what Zareth said. Where is a place for them in the new Zendikar that they're trying to bring about, and them being these otherworldly planeswalkers? And then I guess it's a matter of opinion on that point, but I don't agree that Nahiri was the villain and that Nissa was a hero. I don't like that it was framed that way, because it is framed in such a way that what Nissa did, it was the right call, and I don't think that was the right call entirely. There really wasn't a right call, and like I said before, one of them was going to break, and at this point, the one that broke was Nahiri and Jace. We got Nissa's perspective and her way to solve the problem, and I don't think that's what's good for Zendikar. But I think that's where I ended off. It's like really fucking late right now, and I've been talking for over 45 minutes, counting like the cut takes, and my throat is dry, and I've gone through an entire bottle of water, so I think I'm going to call it a night for now. But I'm really curious as to how all of you, how you all felt about the ending, and what your opinions are, where we're going to move forward, and how you basically look at the characters, and how you feel about the characterization. At least, do you see it in the way that I saw? Do you see it differently? Just let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this entire series, because I don't know if I'm ever doing this again, it depends on your perception, please like the videos. It really helps a lot. Like, I hate when YouTubers do that, but it really does help a lot, and I know that I'm preaching to the choir here. And if you know anybody else that just wants to discuss or talk about the lore, send these videos their way and see if they like them. Because I enjoy doing them, but my god, are they exhausting sometimes. But anyway, it was nice talking to all of you. Have a good night. Have a good night.